is a podcaster, writer, musician. I like to call him the Magic Man. And he's our first male guest and also our first Canadian guest. So you're kind of representing the entire Canadian male species with this episode.
Uh-oh.
A lot of pressure.
As long as we don't start talking about bears, that should be fine.
Okay, awesome. So we're recording this after kind of a major thing has happened in the U.S. with Trump's, assassination attempt, and I was just curious, like, what is Canada saying about this?
It depends on who you listen to. Your media, then it was just a hoax that Trump pulled off to make himself look good to people. Um, I actually heard a lady in the grocery store tell her kid who was crying to stop crying like Trump yesterday. And I was like, uh, but yeah, our news, especially like our mainstream news, the stuff that is on the TV and easy to get in Canada, all very biased. It's all one side. It's kind of bought and paid for by our government, so that makes sense. And we also have laws in place that make it very difficult to air news in Canada, and so a lot of people don't hear anything outside of what they see on the TV. Make, unfortunate for them because they're not getting a full view of what's actually on a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed actually is I feel like in the US we say the same thing about our news, but I actually think Canada's a lot worse. You are kind of like the future of America if we let it go there. But thank God we still have a lot of people who do believe, George Washington, freedom, So I don't think we'll get as bad as y'all are, but it was just so crazy. And regardless of anyone's political stance, this was a human being that we almost watched get slaughtered like an animal on live TV. There were children there. Somebody died there. And this isn't a political podcast, so I don't want to go on and on about it. But it just was so crazy. I remember I was about to record a YouTube video, and my mom calls me, and she's like, "Oh my God, he was shot!" And I'm like, "Who?" She's like, "Donald Trump. I think he's dead." Because like she was watching it live, and so she was like, "Oh my God, he's dead. He's dead." I'm like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "Turn on the TV. He got back up, but he's bleeding." And like it was just crazy. And I remember my boyfriend was working in the yard, and I was like, "Dude, he just got shot." And he's like, "Shut up, like that's not funny." I was like, "No, for real." And it's just been interesting. I don't know if you've heard, but apparently if you there's new footage that came out where there was actually a man standing on a water tower way behind, like 100 yards out or more, and if you listen to the audio of the bullets, you can distinctly hear like two or more separate guns are being fired because the noise itself was different. So I don't know if you've heard about that yet.
I have, yeah. Like you hear like pop pop because it's like an echo, right? So I think people are kind of mishearing that. I'm not sure. All I've really seen is the same video that's going around, which it's hard to know what that is, right? That could be a variety of things at that distance. So I think with anything like this, got to be really careful before we jump to conclusions about it, right? Because uh, it's really hard to ever find out the truth. I mean, if you think about JFK, things are still coming out, right? So I don't think that this will be much different in hindsight either. So yeah, I mean, what we see and what we should be on is that this was awful, and it shouldn't be celebrated like it's being by half of the world, it seems, and it shouldn't be disregarded. Like a lot of people who are saying it's fake, I want them to say that to the family of people who got shot, whether terminally or not, and see if they can actually do that, right? And it's really easy to say things on the internet because we don't see faces, we don't know who we're speaking to, we don't know who's hearing us. But when you do have to have a person in the eye, you're probably not going to say the things that you're typing onto your keyboard. These people should keep that in mind.
Definitely. I think when I saw the lack of compassion, regardless of how you feel about him or any political person, like it's still a person. It's a human being, regardless if they're evil or not. Like, so that was just really concerning. But I think a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from much younger people. And I know that like when you're just becoming like a young adult, you want to rebel against authority and you take that very seriously, becomes your identity. So it's just kind of scary. Like these young kids are like, yeah, like you missed. Oh my God. I'm like, excuse me, like, people died, there was blood, like, on TV, like, are you cool with that? It's just a little frightening, but I think also when I really, like, look at it from a higher perspective, these people that are responding this way, they have their own things in their personal life that they're really upset about, and the easiest way to channel it is into a huge character like Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, he's always been a character human being, so he's a very easy target for them to do this with. It it makes sense. Like I do understand why people. I also understand why people do really like him, and I understand both sides of that. Me, I don't really like him. Like I said, he's a caricature of a human being. I don't want to see the man shot ever, you know, and I feel like that about any evil people. To be honest. But I do understand that people do, and I do think that you're right that it's a lot of the reason why projecting that hatred like that is because of things that aren't pure within them, and this just gives that an. It's unfortunate because public display and it has political ramifications, which are going to affect your future. Like what you mentioned earlier, you guys are like 5 years behind us, but you're heading in the same direction, and you got to be careful because it doesn't look very nice from this side of that fence. And yeah, we got to remember that we're all human beings caught in fire here, quite literally.
Yeah, quite literally in this instance. So just out of curiosity and also to lighten this topic a little bit, so Canada, are the stereotypes true? Is everyone really polite and you're eating donuts and smoking cigarettes?
Most of them, yeah. Everyone is very polite for the most part, right? Like we all, there's bad apples everywhere. There's bad actors everywhere, but for the most part, yeah, we're very polite, very kind of understanding, well mannered, very like a live and let live type thing. To a detriment, though, right? Where it's we don't, as long as it's not affecting us personally, we don't seem to care, but we don't really see it affecting our neighbor per se, and things like that. But the Timmies, Tim Hortons, which as it is, that's a real thing. People are they stuff, mostly the coffee, also the donuts, but yeah, most of the stereotypes I would say are kind of true, especially like around hockey and our accent is just as make funnable, if that's a word, as your southern accent is, right? Like we just have our own version of it, right? So it's it sounds funny, but just like the same thing with you guys. It's a stereotype that's kind of generally true, but not always true. And I think we need to stop reminding ourselves that it's not always true. I think we get it's not always true, and just understand that it's a easy generalization to say, yeah, we've got some characteristics that we all do tend to share, and that's actually kind of cute instead of you know being mad about.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why like stereotypes. I mean, I do think stereotypes are rooted in truth. I mean, obviously, like they come from somewhere, but it's just interesting because I think sometimes they're way off. Like you end up finding out that's something. So I always like to ask, like, what do most Canadians say about Americans? Probably that we're like dumb. I feel like that's a big one.
Yeah, we're almost taught through our school systems to look at you guys as if you're just dumb and make all sorts of mistakes, and yeah, but at the same time, we you so heavily to protect us. It's kind of funny. But yeah, that is the general consensus: is that your political system is a mess and ours is perfect. And um, if you guys would just pay attention to us, then the world would be a much better place.
Right, right, sure. Because Canada's going so well.
Yeah. Hmm.
But anyway, so I was mentioning before that you are into like podcasting. You have an awesome podcast, a miscellanea podcast, and you collect people's stories. You talk about all different types of things. But what's your story? Like, how did you get into, like, for instance, you do metaphysical like training and support. So, would you consider yourself to be like a wizard, or kind of like walk me through what the whole thing with that is?
Well, I was raised around cults. People on the internet have this idea of the Illuminati, even though that's not real. The concept and the idea is real, and it's that was kind of what my upbringing was. So I was taught a bunch of different systems of magic, a bunch of different psychology and a bunch of systems in general um, while I was growing up. And, that kind of gives you a different outlook on the world when you understand that there is a group of people decisions in the world and we don't know their name. You can't Google them and you're not going to find them on anywhere. While all of the stuff that we've already been talking about is all playing out in a way that we're all kind of like, this seems like theater because on that level it is, right? So, years ago now, I guess it was about 2015, 2016, I was writing a blog. I'm going to condense this story just because of time. I was writing a blog that was fictionalized and meant to kind of tell a story to a small group of my friends that got picked up by the conspiracy community. Got shared on like David Icke's forums, big forums, and things like that, and kind of went viral. Like I kind of the way I tell the story, I went to sleep and there was like 20 people who might have read it, and the next morning it was like 100 people who had read it. Really, really ridiculous and scared the out of me. But anyways, eventually I ended up doing interviews talking about my experience in that group everyone calls the Illuminati. Yeah, just continue to. Eventually, I realized that alternative media is just as a mess as the mainstream media. I've been kind of just doing my own thing since because I do have experiences and I do have the accumulated knowledge that came along with it, and I, the rest of the world too. I'm not off in this world where aliens are ruling everything. And, a lot of that other nonsense that gets shared in conspiracy land. So I just try my best to help people make sense of all of the nonsense as it's thrown at us. I do have a bad history of accidentally predicting things before they happen, but I'm not doing that on purpose or making any claims. Just like I said, things are following a script right now, and it's a really big script, but it's a script, and it's easy to predict because it's a script.
Yes.
Aside from that, I also make music. Been in a couple bands. Just doing the third album with the second band. Uh, make music on my own, and I like to write. So now I'm finishing up a couple at the moment.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, we have to ask the cult thing, growing up in a cult. So, is that like how we would imagine, drinking the Kool Aid? You got to sell all your belongings, or is it more just kind of like a coven, people who kind of gather?
Many, right? There was multiple cults. I was kind of bounced around. So some of them were, kind of what you might think of like a witchy or magic. Some were more religion based. Some were more crackpot theory based. The reason why I was being bounced around to understand cult mentality as a whole and see how it works in different flavors, different groups of people, because that's related to religion, mythology, and things like that as well. So, um, and a lot of that stuff is what we're seeing play out in the world right now with the left and the right cults and all the mini cults in between, and it's just a whole world full of cults to be to be,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was why I was raised that way to see all of those different things. So it was never just one, and everything you've heard of, all ends of the spectrum. I saw over that time.
And what I really enjoy about you is that you talk about these things and you understand like the bigger picture, the script, and you're still, at least you seem still very positive and very happy. And I feel like a lot of people tend to swallow the black pill and they're like, it's all a script, we're doomed, the aliens are invading, we're all gonna die. And like, yeah, like things aren't going so well, but that doesn't mean we should all be putting on the tinfoil hats, hyperventilating. So how do you think that you stay, I guess, calm or optimistic?
That's because I was exposed to them so much. I understand what they want, help them achieve it, and a lot of that is by allowing our anger to turn into not righteous on the love end of the spectrum, but more of a hatred filter on the fear end of the spectrum. When we do that, they have where they want us. Right? They do. They're not bothered by our hatred, right? They with our adoration, but they're not bothered by our hatred. Don't give them that. So, um, yeah, in general, I best to just keep the positive side because I understand that that is what's wrong. Right? Is the fact that we are constantly taught that we're weak and we're vulnerable and we're doomed and all of these things where repeating that because we believe it. Our conviction makes it when we do. So a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out there do have that inevitable end to them where you're in prison and you're screwed and aliens are doing this to you and these guys are doing this to you, and that's all by design to keep us frequency on that side. I
Mhm.
and so I try to show opposite. Obviously I get anger. Obviously, that the denomination here, I'm a human being, I feel it, but I just try not to act it out as best as I can and be responsible.
Yeah, so basically, negativity is going to feed it. And if we believe in manifesting and we're all thinking we're doomed, we could very possibly just create it and just, feed their agenda versus being like, you know what? I'm just gonna love, I'm gonna try to be happy, and hopefully things will work out. Which I think that's really positive to talk about that because I think manifestation has kind of become this woo woo, send me money universe, but it's so much more than that. Like we're supposed to reach enlightenment, we're supposed to just be love, feel love, give love. So I think that's a really good point, actually. So I mean, it seems like your podcast is really successful, and like you said, you kind of went viral. Like David Icke, like that's such a big deal. I feel like there's a lot of people who want to start a podcast, but they feel like, there's so many people doing it. Why would somebody listen to me and not, Joe Rogan? So, like, what would you say to somebody who's just starting out and like thinking about doing a podcast?
Everybody likes different flavors of ice cream, right? Like, there's a lot of people out there who really don't like Joe, as an example, no matter how successful. Don't do it to be successful, though. Do it because it's fun for you, right? Do it because you enjoy it. Make it a hobby, and if you can turn that hobby into something, that's great. But just start with it being that. Don't get as discouraged by it because, yeah, it can be. I've seen it through a lot of my friends who have podcasts. It can be really discouraging for them, like out things, do things like clickbait and true to things, and then you get these people just posting absurd stuff and blowing up, right? Because yeah, just try to be true to the process, and then you'll actually enjoy it. You're constantly chasing the carrot; it's not going to be fun. And yeah, like personally, I don't even really do the miscellanea podcast. I really only do the one on Patreon now, just because I'm kind of tired of dealing with the conspiracy community. And if you want to, nonsense to me, you're going to have to pay for it, and that's just the end of it, right? Otherwise, it really benefit me to speak to people who don't want to hear me. That makes sense. So, yeah, everyone can find their own path, is what I'm saying. And just because a lot of other people are doing it or someone else does it better, in your opinion, doesn't mean someone's not going to like the way you do it. If you even think of Joe Rogan example, he tells people all the time, and I remember those days because I remember watching the first bunch that he had done way back in the day, and everyone thought it was nonsense. Only a couple hundred people, or maybe people watching it, right? It wasn't what we know of it as now, but he loved doing it, and that's what transfers. And anything we do is you're going to have to love to do it. You're going to have to love the work that you put into it too. But that will also transfer into the product.
Yeah, I think the reoccurring theme in this episode is love. Like, love what you do, love yourself, love each other. Don't feed into all this BS.
At the end of the day, love is and evil is the choice that we're presented with, right? So you can choose that. Sure, a lot of incentive to choose that. I get it, but underneath all of that is something beautiful. When I was doing a stream earlier, there were some kids outside playing really loud, and I was worried about that coming through on the podcast. And I was almost about to say I apologize for the noise, but then I was like, I don't apologize for the noise because that's beautiful noise. That's kids playing, right? So
Yeah.
what it is. It'd be like if your dog started asking for your attention right now, kind of thing. Yeah, it's we can change our perspective of things if we want to. Love is and evil is the choice.
Yes, that's very, very true. Like I think about like heaven and hell, like let's say that they're for sure real and they exist. Like heaven is, and then hell is the choice to be away from heaven or to be away from God. And that's very true. Like I think about how all of us are inherently innocent. Regardless of the things we do, we're doing the best we can with what we know. So yeah, I think that's powerful. And I get what you mean because sometimes, hear kids screaming and you're like, "Oh my god, like I wish they would shut up." But it's like you're right, like that's life. Those are human beings just having a good time. And if we were laughing, we wouldn't want people to tell us to shut up. So it's a really good point. I wanted to talk about though, so you do metaphysical support and training. So is that like Hogwarts? Like walk me through what that is.
Well, I learned a bunch of different systems of math. And, there's commonalities between all of them that are put in place because someone's somewhere along the line decided that humans were too irresponsible to actually be able to understand how powerful they are. I call nonsense on that. So, just for myself, I kind of developed my own system, if you will, very similar to. That's why Bruce Lee is one of my heroes because it was an inspiration. It was create my own. Be adopt what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is Bruce Lee's quote. And that's more or less what I did with everything. Um, I have learned a lot, let's put it that way, and I choose not to do the majority of it because it's almost like a code that I don't think I deserve to have. But a lot of the things that go into consider magic are kind of like muscles, and if you lose them, you use, or if you don't use, we'll lose them, right? So we need to kind of exercise somehow, and usually that would be through using it. But if you don't want to use it, there's still a bunch of things that you can do in practice getting there. So for me, that's the way that I would use that. And I realized that if I teach that to someone else who wasn't trained the way that I was, they could use all those same tools to train themselves to do the same things because it works both ways, right? It can either be like a workout to build up to a point or a workout to maintain that point, depending on where you're personally at. So I teach what I call a magic class that I define magic. It's your relationship with yourself and your environment and then eventually with others. And so it's about controlling your thoughts, feelings, and actions in the world so that you can be living in accordance with your own will, as opposed to being kind of invisible, puppeted around by invisible strings, like a lot of us find out that we are, right? So, yeah. Then the metaphysical support and training is just a way of saying that I use that same knowledge to help inspire people, help get people out of the funks that they're in, help them hear through the noise when they're having a hard time with that, and just kind of share my experiences with them if they choose. Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of more of like helping them reach maybe enlightenment or kind of just being like, hey, like master your thoughts, master your energy, and less like, hey, let's light, a yellow candle, right?
Yeah. It's the three steps to my class is imagination, will, and conviction. So imagination would be about what it sounds like. Your imagine specifically your ability um,
Wait, specifically your ability to what?
visualize things, like create things with your visual imagination. Storytelling, we're all very good at. It's depression and anxiety from it's going on all the time. It's never weak, but a lot of people these days we take in a lot of our media digitally, or, visually. Sorry, our visual imagination is for that reason. So it's things that people can practice to make sure that that's not lacking and that you do have a very powerful imagination because our brain works like a simulator. It works like these quantum computers that they're selling to us. We just have to kind of train it a little bit in order to get the most benefit out of that, as opposed to having it work against all the different ways psychology keeps telling us that it does, right? All of those things can just be reversed so that they're working for you as opposed to against you. And it just takes a little bit of self training. So basically, what I'm teaching people in the imagination part is some things that can help back that. In the will part, we talk about a little bit more of the woo woo energy stuff. Will, what your energy field is, what it's made out of, how it's working. Regenerate way more energy than we ever use, and we also have a bit of an addictive relationship with our energetic environment as well. That all can be circumvented, so that all that energy that we are creating, we are actually harnessing for ourselves instead of trying to take it from Debbie down the street or from substance X. We can just take it from ourselves, right? Fiction part is more about action, what people can do day to day in their daily life, because choices are made all day, every day. It's not like I've just decided. good person, and now I'm gonna be. You're gonna have to decide to be a good person in a bunch of different situations, over and over and over and over. And the conviction part of the class kind of sets you up to be prepared for that. The
Yeah.
fact you have to put in your 10 hours and stuff. You have to have discipline, routine, and ritual are important, and how you can use them. And so, going back to what you were talking about, a lot of what the occult is them understanding all of this stuff about us, hiding it from us, telling us we're not capable of it, and now they're selling it back to us in the form of technology. So,
Yeah. I will say the last part of what you were describing that you teach is the hardest for me, like dealing with the other people and still being a good person. Because when I was really like starting my spiritual journey, I felt like it was so easy for me to be so happy and just love and light. But I was also very isolated at the time. I kind of lived like a monk. I never left my little apartment. I was always just meditating. I was always just doing me, and it was always just me in my apartment, not doing anything with other people. And then once I started like going outside, I was like, wow, this is hard. It is very hard to be love and light all the time. And so that's been something I've been practicing more and reminding, okay, compassion, compassion, don't snap at them.
yeah,
But I also what you're talking about with visualization, so I teach Reiki, which is just a specific healing modality. Um, and level two, you learn how to do long distance healing. And one of the methods is purely visualizing, either visualizing that you're doing the Reiki session to the person, or even just visualizing the person maybe feeling how you want them to feel, right? Or kind of like if somebody is coming to me and they're like, I just want to feel happy. I want to feel free. So maybe I'll visualize them just enjoying themselves or like frolicking through the woods. And that's very powerful. There was one time I visualized a client saying, I love my life. I'm so grateful. Everything is great. And then I messaged her. I was like, okay, your session's done. How do you feel? She's like, I'm so grateful. I feel like literally everything I visualized, she repeated back to me. So I think it's great that you're teaching people this because it is just a natural thing that we can do that, like you said, it's kind of been wiped from our memory, or from, we just don't learn that anymore.
yeah, like right, what I would consider one of the systems of magic talking about it. Right? So when I say systems of magic, right, of magic included in that pile for me. And yeah, they all work, right? They all work and in their own ways because they all have similar properties to them.
Yeah, like
And
this, the same like core belief.
yeah, yeah. So, even the practices behind them, there a lot of them are very similar, right? And what the occult has done is make sure that the stuff that's in the public always has just enough, you know, room for error. Let's put that enough people will never become convinced that it works as well as it actually can work, right? So, like an example, there would be a lot of different people who say they do what you do, can't actually do what you do, and then if you bump into the wrong person when you go looking, well, it's all nonsense, right? And that's what they've kind of set up for us is that they let us get close enough, but there's always a gate in the way. Can't really pass.
Yeah, and sometimes that gate I think is within some of us. Like for instance, like we get these spiritual egos and they're like, "Oh my god, I don't have a single part of me that has an ego. Like you're so full of yourself. I've ascended higher than you have." And it's so crazy to me. It's like, "What? Like you are not better than me. I'm not better than you. I'm not worse." It's just so funny because I always say like I am dirt, and that doesn't mean I'm bad. It just we are the same thing. Like I'm not better or worse than the dirt. We just coexist. I just don't get it. I really don't.
Plus, I understand. I do the same thing because, like, especially since I opened myself up to like doing people from the audience, um, people would be, or maybe like thinking that I'm something that I'm not before they spoke to me. And I'm just a human like you. I did have different experiences than most people get, and I got to see your side of things as well. So I can help put those together. But it's the Jesus quote, whether that's fictional or not. Of anything I can do in this world, you can do too, and that's where the occultists draw their gate. It convinces us that we can't too, right? And that's what they're heavily controlling at the end of the day. So if people could get into head that the reason why we have such a powerful enemy is because we are powerful, then we would probably things out a lot quicker.
Yeah. I also like that you said if that quote is fictional or not, because that's another thing. We don't really know anything. Like there are some things I think we know, like we just have that inner knowing, but at the end of the day, we don't really know anything. We don't know. Like, what if we are literally in a pod and this is all a dream? And we're just like, it's like a video game, we're making choices, like go to Johnny's house or go to sleep. We really don't know anything. So I like that. I respect that about you because, like I was talking about with the spiritual ego, being like, I know everything. God has revealed it all to me.
I come across that way to some people that because I have a lot of in the things that I say. It's not to say that I'm not open minded to being wrong because I want to be wrong about most of the things that I think are true, to be honest. But it with what I have a lot of experience, and I have a lot of experience in that, be wrong and dishonest if I didn't speak as if I do, right? So people mistake that conviction for some arrogance, but it's really not. I've been playing with this stuff my entire life, like since I was a little kid. I bump into people on the internet on to try to school me on stuff that I learned when I was 4, and it's kind of strange for me. And I'm polite and I'm nice, but I'm not going to lie to you either on either end of that spectrum. So yeah, it's just conviction, and I think more of us need it. The bigger question, like what is this universe, what is this life, all of those things, maybe we don't have the answers for, but there's a lot of things in this world that we do have answers for that we still like to deny for whatever, as
Mhm.
of recognizing them as tools within natural law that we're supposed to be using.
I don't know if you probably are. I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Watts, but I love what he says. He says, like, the purpose of life is just to live.
Yeah, a lot of conspiracy research forget along the way, right? Their emotions get all tied up into it, and they forget that if you were really listening to the information, seeing through the occult, you would understand that this is a way to make your life better, not worse. So, yeah, the proof would be in the result. If it's making you a happier, stronger, more well-adjusted, more easy, like you can actually deal with CNN a little bit better, then it's working. And if you feel the need to keep running, you have more work to do still, and that's fine too, right? There's no competition here. It should be more of a collaboration than a competition to a lot of this stuff as well, which is a bit of a problem we'll sort out. I like to point out that there's problems, but we're going to sort this stuff out eventually.
Yeah, I think that's been my biggest issue because I used to be more into like the conspiracy community or independent research, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes I would find myself really hitting points of despair where I'd be like, oh my God, like I don't even like what if everything goes away tomorrow? Like I can't handle it. And then I started like prepping for like doomsday, I was so afraid. And then one day I was like, you know what? I'm not going to listen to it anymore. And I'm just going to trust what I feel. When I'm presented with information, if my gut says that's probably fake or not true, I'm just going to trust it and I'm going to listen to it. And so far it's served me a lot better than keeping up with the new posts and, all the information. So I think some people in the conspiracy community need to hear that. Like, if you're freaking out, like maybe take a step back for a little while, ground yourself, and then come back to the information a little bit more level headed. Have you ever found yourself feeling that way or like feeling just really afraid?
Well, not that way, but I mean, my relationship with the community I could use as an example. When it first happened, the blog first came out, and everybody wanted to on the circuit and all of that stuff. It was affecting my personal relationships, and I recognized that it was, and I wrote this into a blog. It was affecting my ego, right? Like if you constantly have people going, "Oh, you're so," part of you is going to believe that. So I actually took like a 2-year step away. Just that was like not going to become a hook for me. I think that 2 years is an extreme, but I think that it's important that people even test themselves, right? I mean, the same thing I talked to someone I knew smoked marijuana on a regular basis. Like, can you go without it? Have you ever tried? Because if you can't, then you do. need to sort out. So definitely try once in a while. Remind yourself to go without it. When it comes to the drip feed of it in this world of conspiracy research, it works like it, right? I can remember in, like cults, they used to say various say things like, let's say it was based around a book like a Bible. They'd say, "Oh, you should only read it for that time because it's an opiate. It's like a drug," and
Yeah.
that same thing for all this information too.
That's a good point. It's kind of like a hit, whether that's into negativity or positivity, depends on you, I guess. But that's a very good point. And I think I don't like fear. I don't like being angry either. So I just try to be compassionate. And even like when with the Trump thing that happened and people are like, I can't believe they missed, and they were like, of course, part of me was like in shock and maybe I wanted to be angry, but I was like, you know what? Have compassion for them too, because they're going through something. They're a human being. And I think if we all just took a moment, like we all can't help our initial response, right? We can't help our initial like gut reaction, but you can take a deep breath, like woosah, like everything's cool. Just calm down and have compassion. Like we're all the same person. It's even like if there's something about you, for instance, that I notice maybe I don't like it, I could take a moment and be like, you know what, maybe that's something that I also do. Maybe this is highlighting to me something I need to work on internally. And I think that I keep bringing up ego. For some reason, it's on my mind. And I think that that's just a major problem. We don't want to admit when we're wrong. We don't want to admit that we're not perfect. And even some people celebrate their like bad choices, which I mean, I don't want to pass judgment. I don't know, but it's kind of like, should we be proud of that? Should we be like, I'm like, dude, I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm kind of lost in my own mind.
Yeah, yeah. Overall, just being able to kind of step back and recognize are all human and do have, you know, these vulnerabilities to dopamine and to the opposite of that, the lack of dopamine and like, you know, love it like a toxic kind of love, if you will, that we kind of see on social media a lot, versus, you know, the fear that it's also constantly feeding into you. A lot of the way that we learn through manifestation how it works, we don't really think about how that's happening on a collective level. How our imagination is fueling the energy which creates the physical world. And so everything that we see that is wrong, it's because there's still something wrong here within all of us collectively. And we need to get in touch with that, feed our own imagination of what that's supposed to look like instead of letting, yeah, ego is a big, and none of these things about like are bad, right? With the ego, like I think it was Mark Passio who said, if you didn't have an ego, and a branch broke off, you wouldn't know to get out of the way, right? So that is very true. That's why it's there. It's there for a variety of different reasons that are beneficial to us. Same all of the aspects of being human. They seem negative in some way. They can also be very positive. We mentioned anger. There is a righteous anger. The
Yeah.
people who are, you know, pro Trump and were angry about a righteous anger, whereas the people who are anti-Trump are angry because that's the opposite, and that's actually a good example of the difference, right? Is not all negative is bad, right?
Yeah.
And not positive is good, as a matter of fact. And we are very reactive. Part of the class that I teach as well that focuses on that on the positive and on the negative. If we have a very powerful emotional reaction to something, we stop looking for truth. We start looking to validate that feeling, positive or negative. And the way they'll make a statement and then they'll qualify. So a lot of the time when we hear something like, we don't listen to why they're saying it. If we did listen to why they're saying it, we might understand that there's some truth in there that's valuable to us. But we get really caught up in ah, and we miss any of that. And that happens on the other side. If someone says something you really do, it's that you stop listening. And so it's important to learn how to be able to put that feeling aside, respect that feeling for what it is, which is information that's valuable to you, but it is not how you truly feel about something. You're going to need to get more to figure that out. And that's important for people to learn. And the mystery schools, the occult, they teach us that right from the time where it's installed into you like a soft, and it's very valuable, and that's why from public schools as well, is because it is valuable. Where they get us now is they really hit us in our feelings because they know that we are good at our core, and they just pervert and use, and we got to be able to when they're doing that.
Yeah, I think one thing that really is a problem are labels, because we'll say, "Oh, well, you're Democrat, you're Republican," or and it just kind of dehumanizes the person that you're talking to. Even this is kind of off topic, but I just saw a video like before this about this experiment that Russians did on war prisoners, like prisoners of war, and it like really hit me for some reason when I was watching this video. Like they say like prisoners of war, and you just think prisoners of war. You don't think man. You don't think like human being right away. And you're hearing this horrible experiment where they took a group of these men and they tried to keep them awake for 30 days straight. And so they kind of talked about what the people went through, and it just hit me so hard, like these terms like again, Democrat, Republican, prisoner of war, or lesbian, gay, whatever. It dehumanizes you, and it makes you this thing. And I wish people would, again, just like the humanity, where's the humanity? And I just hope that whoever watches this takes a moment to think about how maybe they've mistreated people without knowing. Again, I think we're all innocent. We do our best with what we know, but just like think about it. This person isn't a Democrat or whatever. They're just a human being.
I'll give you a recent example of how we be able to look at things. When people were wishing for Trump's death, I had made a post saying that, like, wishing people dead is evil, and a lot of people took that, calling them evil, right?
It's
Oh,
the action, not the person, right?
not the person, right? We all have the capacity. Sometimes we are all evil, but that doesn't make us all evil. For it, sometimes we take we do evil deeds. Let's put it that way. Sometimes we do evil deeds with the best of intentions. And we have to understand that there's a difference between taking an act and being that. Just as there's a very big difference between leaning right, being a Trumper, or just leaning right, or leaning left and being a leftist, or all of those labels like you're out. They're all there to other. They're all there to put people in boxes. And anyone who gets into conspiracy research, you're going to bump into transhumanism. And transhumanism agenda that's working against us. And there's all sorts of different flavors of that. Communism is a very obvious one. And there's a bunch of other ones. And the end result, the proof and the result of your ideology results in transhumanism, are you othering? Are you looking at a group of if they need to be gone in order for things to be right? You, because if you come to that conclusion, there's still transhumanism in your to work out.
Yeah. Wait, so you kind of broke off a little bit. Transhumanism is what? The very last thing you said?
There is still transhumanism in your ideology that you're going to need.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And I think that the way that they end up really dehumanizing us is through fear. Like when you're afraid and they say, "Oh, well, this person is Republican, Democrat, whatever, and if they win, then we're all going to die or we're all going to suffer." And so it's really just a fear like herd mentality. And I could go deep on this one actually, because you think herd and then you think sheep. And when people say, "Oh, you're a sheep," it means you're asleep. But then in Christianity, if you're a sheep, Jesus is your shepherd. And, you know, it's really weird when you look into the terminology and the symbolism and then numbers, of course, numbers, all the numbers, club 33, 33 degrees of masonry, all this. And it's like when you start going down the rabbit hole and you understand the basic principles, I almost feel like you don't really need to watch the conspiracy podcasts and stuff like that, because you can start putting it together for yourself. And I think that's just what I want to see from more people, is more independent thought and less group think or group thought or whatever.
100%. Like, even the ability to your own group, right? Like, you can be a supporter and say that you really don't like this thing that he did. Right? That's allowed too. or you could be a Biden supporter and say you really don't like this. That should be allowed too. We need to um, overgeneralization. Generalize, we mentioned earlier, is a helpful tool, but the overgeneralization and look at humans are static and they just don't fit that way. And so we can't do that to each other because that's still othering each other at the end of the day. And yeah, it takes many to acquire, and what we are trying to not a solo act. It is a choir. So
Yeah, I like that before you called it like the theater, like kind of like the theater of life where it's like a play. I personally see everything in the world as like a sports game. You know, like you either like the, I don't know, the Canadian team or the USA team. You know what I mean? And there, it's just, it's silly. And even like when you go to a sports game and people are freaking out, like they will fight you if you like the other team. And that's what we see happening all the time. But even with stupid stuff, like in the US, we have Ford and Chevy, right? And they're like, oh, if you like Ford, you're a loser. You like Chevy, you're stupid, you know? And it's like some of it's funny, you know, it's just kind of camaraderie and like, but some people take it so far and it's over the dumbest things. And it's like, you know, I wish, you know, it just takes a moment to reflect. Why am I so wanting this team to win? What am I ignoring in my personal life that really is bothering me where I'm screaming at the TV?
yeah, bread and circuses, and I mean we need to play, right? Like we play as important, that's for sure. But yeah, it's I used to work in a sports arenas and things like that, facility security management, and yeah, to see what sports are like, and then that's it's cult indoctrination too. I worked for an AHL, and you would see the way that they would target the children, and the way that they would even talk about it being the next generation of hockey fan, right? And that works. I'm not saying there's anything sinister, just saying that that works because of what we are as humans. And that's where all cult kind of behavior it's from is we are looking for the tribe. For a long time, we, we required it. And we all deeply want community. We all deeply want companionship. Nothing in nature lives for itself. And that can be used against us.
Yeah, yeah, and really quick, I want to bring it back to what we were saying with like you mentioned children, and we were talking about, man, I can't remember, but what came to mind was how children, right? So they have access to YouTube and social media and smartphones. And I have a stepdaughter who just turned 7, and she likes to watch YouTube, which like I'm okay. I try to monitor it, you know. But sometimes like if I'm really busy, I'll be like, here, you know, play on your tablet, you know, and I'll walk away. And then a lot of times I'll go back just to see what was suggested to her, what she watched. And some of it is kind of frightening. Like it'll look like it's just a cartoon, but it's not just a cartoon. Like they're saying some inappropriate things, and that's how they get the children. They start grooming them because it looks like, oh, it's a cartoon, cool, and it's like, you know, propaganda, or it's just inappropriate, quite, you know, you could imagine. And you know, I think, you know, we say that you should, you know, imagine the best case scenario. We should try to, like, you know, not manifest or not feed into the fear and the anger, but there is righteous anger, like what you were saying. So it's like, we're not saying just live in la la land, love and light, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, like pay attention, know what's going on, but don't let it like cripple you. Don't let it make you like into some type of like psychosis.
We're supposed to stop before we fall off the cliff. And that's it, right? If we're just looking up here, we're going to miss the cliff. And so it does require, a nice even view of the sky and the ground in order to keep safe. And sometimes warnings, they're based in fear because it's a worry about something that could come, could be very bad, right? That's also a good representation of fear, if you will. And so people need to remember that. But we also need to not take things too where I'm grooming. The way the right wing was taking that with the drag shows and everything, like far to that extreme on that side. Not that that's not always an extreme, but we also need to stop dealing with opposites. It's like that thing our parents would tell us where two rights or two wrongs don't make right. We don't always back just because they hit us. And it comes to things like that would be a big lesson. You know, cheers and drag queens are they just are, right? And in that context, they're bad. And to say that one's wrong and the other is not is where you everybody's conflicting. Be able to see where mutually crossing, right? And correct that line. It doesn't mean we have to throw the baby water. We throw
Mhm.
the bathwater away. We keep the baby,
Yeah.
right? We need to do that with a lot of the different systems and social norms in society these days because both sides have a very but the way that you're screaming at each other, you're missing each other's point, and that's the problem. We don't have an we have a comprehension problem, and that's an example of it.
Yeah, and I don't think our schools are doing a very good job of teaching anything towards comprehension or really anything. It's actually quite frightening. Again, like, I have a very young stepdaughter and I see her schoolwork and I had to teach her how to read. She was 6, still couldn't read, can't really write. And I didn't realize that. And I looked at her schoolwork and they were just cutting pictures, gluing stuff, glitter. And I had to teach her myself. And I was like, what's the point of her going to this school? It's like a daycare.
It's a daycare. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what it is. That's so that we can have equality and everyone can go to work. Yeah.
Oh boy. But anyways, I think this might be a good ending point for us. But thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I think we talked about a lot of really awesome things. Was there anything else you wanted to add or say?
No, I'm good. I talk too much, so it's all good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and nice to meet everybody on your channel. And hope everyone has a wonderful day.
All right, awesome. Bye.
Ah.